What's a particle? Well, if you've ever played video games, you've seen them or they're in movies. A particle is something that's born, does something for a certain amount of time, and then it dies. That's how it works in After Effects. Some third-party plugin systems you can buy have a constant particle system, but not After Effects. So that's why when I say it's going to be born, do something, and then die and go away, that's how they work in After Effects. So we'll start off with the simpler one first. There's 3 of them. We're only going to learn 2 because you don't need to learn the third one. The one we're going to learn tonight is Particle Playground. And did they get rid of it? Nope. Okay, they've got it. So in your effects, just make a solid layer and throw Particle Playground onto it. And then when you hit the spacebar, you'll start to see the particles come out of it. So the particles are being born and they're shooting out of this like a water fountain and falling off the screen. That's what they're doing. When you're working with particles, you can use them for very complex motion design, special effects, and more complex animation than you'd normally get. So they're incredibly useful to have and know. And, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to work with them. So let's start learning about particles. The general rule of thumb, no matter what particle system you're in or what software you're using, is worry about the motion first, then worry about the look. And I'll explain that, meaning first get the particles moving the way you want, and then change the way they look. Like, this is very dated. It looks like very 1980s, but we could do something far more photorealistic with it once we get the look of the particle motion that we want. So you always work on the look and then you dial in. You worry about the motion first, then you dial on your look. So we've already got our solid. We've already got Particle Playground on it. So here's how this particle system works. The cannon is this tiny little dot there that they're all coming out of. So, you can move it around the screen. You could animate it if you want. They're coming out of the cannon. Some of them have a producer, some of them have a cannon, some of them have an emitter. So it's always a source of where the particles come out of. Barrel radius. That's how wide they're shooting out of that cannon they're being produced from. Clearly, a smaller number, you get a finer spray coming out. Number of particles per second, that's pretty obvious. That's how many come out per second. Smaller number, it'll render faster. A larger number, it'll take much more time to render. When you're doing special effects in movies, they use millions of particles per second. So, you want the best look with the least amount of particles for the fastest render time. But if render time's not an issue, you could go way over the top Hollywood style and have billions of particles for all I care. The direction, it's which direction they're coming out of the emitter for Particle Playground. Let me make this a little bit more so people can see it. Everyone with me so far? Okay. If I increase the randomness, I'm getting a little bit more of an organic feel, as if wind turbulence has gone through and changed it. So randomness will always add more random to it, whereas if you get rid of that, you get a more uniform look, okay? Velocity is how far out of this they're shooting. So they got to go out faster and further with the higher number, and they'll go out slower and shorter from the producer with a smaller number. So again, a larger number, they go out faster and further. A smaller number, they go out slower and shorter. If I increase the randomness of that, that's what's going to happen. My general rule of thumb when I'm working with effects and things that are new to me in After Effects is I go big. I type in a huge number, see what it does, and then I dial it in for the look that I want. So that's usually a general rule of thumb. Now, particle color, that one's self-explanatory. It's the color of the particles. This is the one that confuses some people. Particle radius. This is actually not how far it's shooting out. It's actually the size of the particle. See, I got a much finer particle there and a much larger particle with the bigger number. So always consider the size of the particles you're using in relation to the scene they're in and what you want them to do. So that's very important when you're dialing in your look. Any questions so far on this most basic of particle emitters? Okay, great. Now, the only reason I'm showing you Particle Playground, because it's a very basic particle emitter, is for this. Layer Exploder. I'll get to that in a second. All right, so I'm going to type in some text. We shrink that down a little bit, and I'll change the font. Okay, so there's my text. I'm going back to my particle layer. In Layer Exploder, if I choose the text, we'll give it a moment so you can see it's thinking down here. And I'm going to do effects and mask as well. And I'm going to drop down my preview resolution to go a little bit faster here. And let's change the particles per second. Let's drop that down so we go a little faster. And you know what? Maybe it's not behaving because I didn't pre-compose this. So let me pre-compose this. Move all attributes. Now let's try that and see if it makes it go a little faster. Remember, the general rule of thumb is if something's not working right, pre-compose it, and sometimes that helps fix the issue. I'll give this one more moment to see if it starts working. It's going to take a while for this more complex animation. All right, it's going to take too long to render this, but what it's going to do is, there we go. The particles are coming out in the shape of the text. Okay? Let me go back a few frames so you can see that. It was rendering out the whole simulation. That's why it was taking so long. So can everyone see the particles coming out in the shape of the text on my screen? Okay, now you see this in allergy commercials or like seasoning and salt commercials. You can reverse this motion in. So go backwards into the type. So the particles create the text, or you could have the text blow away. All right, that's one use for particles. If we let the whole simulation run out, but that would take a long time, as you saw. And that's even with the reduced resolution. All right, so I'm just checking this. All right, layer map. Watch what's going to happen in this instance. I'm going to get rid of this. Say no for my layer exploder. So you see what the layer exploder does? It's almost like someone dissolving in the Thanos snap effect. Now layer map, if I choose my text, the particle now becomes the text. Layer map is your custom particle. So let's hide the text, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go to my project, and I've got some images in Canvas. They're in week 9. I'm going to download the cloud and the gladiolus and the smiley face and the water drop. And now you're going to start to see how particles can be pretty interesting and pretty fun. So I'm going to bring in the water drop. Okay, so let's worry about our motion. I'm going back. I'm going to get rid of my text. Don't need it. Let's go to your particle emitter. Let's have this go off to the side. Sure. Increase the velocity. Make that smaller for the radius. And then let's have it go upward a little bit like that. Yeah. And keep a tight radius. Slide this over a little bit so we can see. Okay. So now, if I put that water drop in my scene and hide it, I may need to scale it down. We'll find out. So for a layer map, if I choose the water drop, yep, see, let's go none. I'll scale this down because it's too large. It's doing 1-to-1 based off of, that's still too big. So let's try 10. Okay, that's a bit better. And I'm going to pre-compose it just to be on the safe side. Move all attributes. So now I'm going to hide it in my layer stack. And for here, I'll go there. Now I'm starting to get more of an actual water type of look. So particles per second, let's crank that up to 400. Now it's starting to look like a stream coming out of a hose. And I could make it look like a mist by spreading it out further if I wanted. And let's decrease the velocity a little bit, tighten it up a little. Let's go forward a little. Let's check it out and then render that one frame rather than the whole animation. That's another benefit to particles. You don't have to render the entire animation to get a look and feel for it. So does everyone see the difference already in that dated, simple looking particle? And let's see what happens if I change this blending mode. Let's try screen just for the fun of it. Let's see if that changes my particle look. Nope. Okay, that's not going to influence it. I was just playing around seeing what would happen there. So layer exploders, if you want to explode an image, and your layer map is the custom particle you would use inside this. Let's see, gravity. If I increase it, it's going to pull it further towards the Earth. And if I go negative, it's going to make it go up towards the sky. Like that. Everyone see the difference? Okay. You could add in other physics things. So that's just a quick introduction to the most basic of the particle emitters. Positive gravity pulls it towards the Earth. And negative gravity would be like lighter than air, dust particles floating up in the sky. So figure out your motion, then change the particle with what you want. I used a little water drop. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this. That was just a quick introduction. The most useful particle system you'll be using is Particle World. So I'm going to go Layer New, Solid, and throw Particle World on that one. And then when everyone's got that, okay, great. And you just hit the space bar to preview your default particle system. Let's take a look at what we learned from that and apply it to this. The grid is what you'll see in the particle system. We'll get to the grid a little later on. Birth rate is how many are coming out per second. See? Smaller number, less. Larger number, more. Okay? And over here is in your info, it'll tell you basically how many particles you got in the scene. So remember, too many is a bad thing because it'll slow you down. Longevity is how long they live. See, I can do a fraction and they're not living as long. Now watch what happens if I change it from a fraction to a larger number. See the difference in the animation? Because they're living longer, so they're staying on the screen longer and doing something. Whereas if I change that, completely different look and feel. Everybody got that? I'm going to twirl down to particle for a second. Now, I'm going to pick two colors randomly. I'll pick yellow, and for the birth and for the death, I'll choose blue. You're seeing both yellow and blue here because the particles are only living for a fraction of a second, okay? That's what it looks like. Now, if I change this, I'm seeing more yellow because they're living longer. So they're staying alive longer. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So I wanted to show you what they look like first and then change the color so that you could actually see that. See, now I'm seeing a bit more blue because I'm past the 1 second mark. Now it's a mix of each. I'll get some that stands out a bit more. See? Red and blue. You're seeing both of them because they're living less. All right? So a particle's born, it does something, and then it dies. And in particle world, we can change the color, the size, everything throughout the life of the particle. So I'm going to keep this 2 and 1 just because it's rendering pretty quick and we can see what's going on. Now, producer. This is like the Canon. So position changes the position of it. And you can see the grid down there showing you where it lines up. The reason the grid's there is you can use this in scenes you shot to get special effects. Like they use stuff like this in like Doctor Strange. So the grid helps you line up your effect with the shot you're placing it in. And you use the position to change that. Now the radius is how far out they're going. Okay, so you can get a very deep particle system for like stars or like a bunch of fog in the sky. And you think about what you want. So this could be like raindrops coming off the lip of a fountain, you know, because they're not going very high, but they're going very wide. So, you know, you just play around with your settings to get the look you want. That's what the radius is for how far out they're going. No? Okay. Next tab down is physics. This is the main one. The default is explosive. You got all different types of physics engines. You can play around with them to get the look you want. I'm going to do twirl for this. So again, velocity, how far and fast they're going out of the particle system. We can change that. Gravity, a positive number pulls them down to the ground. A negative number drifts them up in the sky like they're lighter than air. Now this is the main one in your particle system, resistance. 50 is the highest it can go. Resistance will make your particle strength, like the strength of the physics engine, weaker. So 50, the highest number. Oops. See, that's it. None. And you can just keep sliding it back and forth until you get the look you want. Make sense? Okay. Extra is randomness. It's randomly changing the rotation and the velocity. Less extra gives you a more uniform look. So I can crank this up and then try and change the angle of the extra. Okay. We'll get to floor later. Now, I sort of have the look I want. We'll say, yeah, sure, this is the effect I want, but let's move it. So I'm going to want it a little lower to the ground, like right about there. Okay, now let's dial this in a bit. The physics. Let's weaken the velocity. Let's make it a little bit stronger. Okay, now weaken it. And let's give it that inherent velocity. And you know what? Let's do positive gravity. We'll pull it towards the Earth. Okay, and now I'm going to move it up. You can have your physics engine the producer start off the screen if you want. It's really all up to you. Oh, you can do negative in the extras as well. Okay, so now I'm getting something interesting. Now let's talk particle. Particle type. You've got some defaults. Like faded sphere is one of the few good ones. You could use it for like stars in the sky. And a lot of them just look silly. You know, you can play around with those. But here's the two we're going to be using as modern motion designers. Down here at the bottom, there's textured disk and textured faded disk. Okay? So we're going to focus on that in a second. But first, I'm going to talk about custom particles inside of Particle World. I'm going to bring in that smiley face that I downloaded. And it's a very large graphic. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to click my new composition over here. When you're doing custom particles, you don't want them very large because they're not going to be that big on the screen. 200 by 200 should be more than enough. 400 by 400 max, but 200 by 200 should be plenty big. So I'm going to place my face in there, and I'm going to rename this face. And if you've got a custom particle, you're going to make sure it fits completely inside your Precomp for that custom particle. So this is completely inside of my Precomp. That's important. I'm going to bring that Precomp in, hide it, and go back to my custom particle system. So it's in my scene, hidden. You don't need to see it. I'm going to go, well, textured square and texture faded disk are the two main ones. Well, these three here. So I'm going to do textured square. Now, whenever you add a texture, that's your custom particle. You've got to twirl down the texture menu below it. And then in your texture layer, use the drop down. I'm going to choose the image layer that it is. And now I've got the smiley face. Everyone let me know if you've got the custom particle working in the particle system. Okay, I'm going to move forward. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to make my particles larger so you can see this next part. So I'm going to make these born at 5 and their depth size 5 as well. So they're staying the same size. I'm going to lower the birth rate. Now, scatter, that's not going to spread the particles out. What scatter is going to do, since we have a textured square, picture a square with this particle inside it. And I'll show you what that means. See how we're getting these hard lines and we're not seeing the full image anymore? That's what scatter's doing, is it's moving the particle around inside the square that it's placed in. It's not spreading out the particles. It's just shifting where the image is inside it. You're going to want to usually avoid scatter at all costs. Opacity map. This is telling me it's fading on, staying fully opaque for a while, and then fading off. You'll notice once I hover inside the opacity map, I get a pen. I can now click and drag to fill in those light gray areas. So it's not going to fade on or fade off. It's going to keep a constant opacity. That's usually what I want. And then maximum opacity is what's the most amount of opacity that particle will have. I changed that to 100. Size variation. If you set that down to 0, they're going to be all the same size particle. Set it to 100. And you're going to get different size particles coming out. So if I do a birth size of 3 and a death size of 0.25, they're going to get smaller as they die. And I'm going to make this life, let's try 0.2. Now you're seeing it more quickly. Okay, that's what this particle is doing now. I want you to focus on the smiley face that I brought in. It's yellow and has blue eyes. My color map I added to it, the birth and death size. You could also do custom colors as well. But if I make both of these white in my birth and my death, it'll keep the color of the image you're using as your custom particle throughout its life. So that's all in your birth and life coloring. Volume shading will add some depth to the scene. Let me have these last a little longer. And you can see it back there where they're a little further away. Any questions on those settings I showed you? Okay, you're absorbing this pretty quickly. So textured square, think of a square piece of paper and the particles inside it. Everyone's got that concept. Textured faded disk. I'm going to switch that. Now you see how they have softened edges? This is good when you want your particles to blend seamlessly together to create things like fire and smoke and light effects. So you could either have hard edges or soft edges that help blend things together. I am going to make a new particle, 200 by 200. I'll call this smoke. And I'll put my cloud in it. And again, I've got to scale it down so it fits completely inside of the custom particle shape. So I go back to my particle layer. And for my textured layer, I got to add it to the scene. We'll put I didn't name it, did I? No, I did not. That's right here, smoke. So I click the eyeball to hide it. Now I go to my textured layer. I choose smoke. I keep it on effects and masks. And now I've got clouds coming out. Like such. So let's go back to our physics engine. Let's try vortex. And I'm going to move this down. And we're starting to get that type of look. So I'm going to go to my particle. Let's take a look here. There's a few more settings I want to go over. So think about what these do in nature. Smoke gets bigger as it goes on. So I'm going to shrink this down. It'll start off smaller. And as it's dying, it'll get larger. Like such. Size variation, yeah. Okay, so let's crank up the birth rate a little bit more. And we'll have it live longer. Let's have it... Yeah, we'll have it live longer, sure. Let's look at our producer now. This one is looking a little too loose for my liking. Let's try upping the resistance. There we go. Now we've got something usable. And my gravity is too strong. So let's change that. Now I'm getting something a little bit more interesting. Let's decrease the velocity so they don't go as far. There we go. All right. So let's talk a little bit about particle opacity. If I have this dense like this, it'll look like smoke. If I lower my opacity, it's now going to be more like mist or steam or fog. Same particle, I just changed its overall opacity so it doesn't get that thick. And I've got my transfer mode as composite, so it adds a little bit of density to it. Can everyone see that? Okay. Now, I'm going to make this maximum opacity a little bit more. Take a look at this. We got our cloud, and it looks a little goofy because it's a still image just twirling around. Well, I can go to my smoke pre-comp that I've got right here. Let's zoom in a bit. And let's change this. Let's add some life to it. Let's try turbulent displace. Throw it on here. Under evolution, I'm too lazy to keyframe, so I'll just hold down Alt or Option, click on there. I'll use my time expression. Time, asterisk, let's try 200. Remember, when you see the text bar in the expression field, you're still in it. When it turns into an arrow, that means you're out of it and you can click. So now I've got that happening. Okay, that's pretty decent. Let's see what I can do with that. That's a bit better. Let's have less, let's increase the size. Okay, that's pretty decent. Okay, that's not that bad. Let's try twist. Nah. I'll try turbulent smoother for this. And I'm going to animate the offset as well. So I'm going to click there. And over time, I'll have it move. Let's have it move up. Like that. So let's see what it looks like now. That's a little bit better. So we added a little bit of life with some effects in here. Let's go to now. You can see there's less uniformity to the particle and more life because it's moving over time. It's got a more natural look to it. I could use a displacement map if I wanted to push this even more, get some more life out of it, but I'm just showing you, you can animate your still images or use video clips or whatever. It doesn't have to be still. The more life you give it, the more organic it's going to be inside your particle field. Let's lower that life. I mean, how long it lives. And I can now focus on, let's have a smaller birth size, a larger death size. Full size variation, sure. Let's lower the opacity a little bit. I've got a far more interesting thing now. See how much more organic that looks because we've got all that randomness with the turbulent displace happening. So each particle being born looks different from the previous ones. And since they're moving the way it would be doing in the real world, it adds a little bit more of convincing motion to it. Any questions so far? All right. And you can see me playing with the resistance. Now they're fading further. They're going further off the screen. I could always fill in the gaps by adding more particles to give it more density. Or even have the particles live a little longer too. Let's see what that does. See, completely different look. It's all about playing around. What I normally do is I write down my numbers as I'm going so I could see what's working and what's not. And that's too high of a particle count just for this demonstration. All right. So just think about that. Like changing the maximum opacity will change the look of these. Let me drop it down some more. So it'll be denser. That was 60 gigs I just purged from messing around with these particle systems. Make sure you purge when you're doing more complex motion, or else you'll crash your machine. There we go. Now it's working again. I was running out of room. Okay, so we covered opacity and color over life and maximum opacity, the randomness. So we've got a little bit of time left. We covered a lot, which is good. You're able to absorb it all. You saw how using a still image and animating it gave us a more organic look than just a still image. So you can animate your particles. Now I'm going to, let's see, should be around here. Let's try week 9 particles. And again, you can use paint splotches, really whatever you like. Where's the green screen fire? Here it is, fire green screen. It's in week 9. This will be the last one I go over for tonight. And it's a great way of tying it all together. So I'm going to import that. And so remember, I'm going to make a custom particle. So I want it to be about 200 by 200. I hit OK. And my fire, I bring it in. It's too big. I've got to scale it down so it fits inside. Okay, great. Now, key light to remove the green screen. Right there. Click my green. That's gone. I'm going to show you, this is already correct because the green screen is in a pre-comp. I'm going to rename that. I'll call it fire. And I'll put keyed so I know it's keyed. Now I'm going to copy this. So is there a way I can do this without... Yeah, I think if I... Okay, yeah. All right, so here's what we'll do. This one will keep keyed out in its own pre-comp. It's already labeled keyed. So I'm going to make a new scene. And I'll make it 1920 by 1080. And we'll hit OK. All right, I'm going to put a solid in for our particle layer. Remember, naming your layers helps other people when they're working on your files. Okay, we got that, and we're going one particle world. Throw that on there. Hit my spacebar. So I hit the spacebar. And for physics, we're going to do fire. So this is too high up. That'd be in our producer. I'm going to move it down. And there you go. Now, let's try and increase the resistance so it's not going so high. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's give it less. We'll increase the extra and see if that makes it... No, that's too much. We'll lower it. All right, good. So I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to show you the part with the fire we were talking about. First, I'm going to put the fire here. That's way too large. Why am I not seeing it? Oh, it's over here. Here we go. And I'm going to key it out. 1 second. Put on the wrong layer. It's my fire. Key it out. Okay, now I did not pre-compose this. It's just the video clip in the scene. All right, this is the wrong way to do it, and I'm showing you why. So I'm going to want faded edges so that the fire blends together. So I go to my particle. We want faded disk down here, texture at the bottom. Texture is the image or video you use. So I'm going to choose fire. Now you'll notice if I just did source, it's still green, okay? When I did effects and masks, it copied the green screen. So if you just brought it in, it's going to keep the green from it. And doing effects and masks, it gets rid of it. But I'm a big fan of using pre-comps because it just saves you so much headache and gives the computer less to have to think about. So I'm going to use my pre-comp for that, and it's already working fine because the green screen's removed inside of the pre-comp. So let's crank up the birth size, and we'll have them get a little smaller as they die. Larger birth size. Okay. Still a little bit larger. Okay. So I'm going to use the color of the video. So I'm going to have my birth and my death white. And since fire is a light effect, we did composite for the gas and the smoke because that's got some density. But we could do screen, get some more realism, or add, get even more realism. Screen, when something's stacked on top of something, it brightens up the image. Add, everything on top of the next one makes it brighter and brighter and brighter. So in real life, this middle would be much hotter and brighter, just like we're seeing here. So I'm just going to do add for this. Now, if this is a bit too much, we can always, they're not going to fade on or off. So I'm going to fill in my opacity map like that. Now for my maximum opacity, it'll change how bright that add blending mode is getting. So that's one way of controlling the brightness. Size variation, we'll do 100%. And I'm not going to have them live longer than the video clip. Like the video clip is only, let's see, where's my my time code on this? That is weird. There's my time code now. 210. So this lives about 2 seconds. I'm going to duplicate it in here. Oops. If I duplicate down here with Control D and snap it, I can duplicate both of these, drag them up to the top, hold down Shift to snap it. So now I've got 10 seconds of fire, so that my particle system doesn't run out, because that was going to be a risk. So now I know I've got 10 seconds of particle life. So if I do 9, I'm going to get a completely different result. And if this grid is getting in your way, you can always twirl it down and click off all that stuff so you don't see it anymore. So that's our introduction. We've used custom images, we've animated the images, and now you've learned how to use video as a particle. I can also use, let's try from start. What that's going to do is every particle is going to start at the start of the video clip. And that's going to give a little bit of randomness because they're all live at different times, because some of them are live for 9 seconds, some of them are just being born, and already we're getting something a bit more interesting than that. So that's all the stuff I wanted to cover tonight. And then as always, we could throw a glow on this if we wanted to. Add a little bit more to it. And since it's a light effect, I'm going to my project panel, holding down Alt or Option and clicking on the BPC, bits per channel, 32 bits per channel, and I'll get more dynamic range. So now I can go in here and dial in my glow. So I'm going to lower the threshold, increase the radius, and drop down the intensity a little bit. And then next week, we're going to go deeper into particles. But before I end the lecture, I just want you to think this out. Like, we've got the fire here, and it's doing its own thing. I'm going to drop down my preview resolution, and I'm also going to purge my disk cache. See, again, 36 gigs. The more complex your animation is, the more it's going to eat up your computer. Okay, so I'm going to call this particles. And I'll mail it out tonight after we're done talking. All right, so here's my first particle, and I'm going to call this fire. Each layer will have its own particle to it. So like my fire is one layer because I'm using the textured faded disk. I'm going to duplicate this. Command D. And this one I'm going to rename smoke. I'm going to put it below the fire. So here I am. I've got my particle system for the smoke. I'm going to turn off the glow because my smoke is not going to glow. I'll even get rid of it. So I'm going to go to my particle, and I've still got, let me close this footage. Where's my smoke? Right over here. I'll throw my smoke in my timeline. It's still animated. So I go to my smoke layer. I click the eyeball icon to turn it off. I've got my texture faded disk. For my texture, I'm going to choose the smoke. Now I'm starting to get some smoke behind there. And now I just dial in the look of my smoke. So I'm going to hide the fire. And look at my smoke. The smoke's going to get larger as it dies. It's going to be smaller as it's born. And I'm also going to change the opacity of it a little bit. See how high that's going to go. So that's going to rise up higher than the smoke is going. So let's see what that looks like. So the fire I'll have go not so high up. Let's bring that down a little. And then that'd be under physics. Velocity, give it less velocity. What happens if we increase the gravity? And let's up the resistance. There we go. Now it's not going up so high. The smoke's going higher than that. I'm happy with that. And we could also have the smoke go a little... I'm on the smoke now. I'm on the smoke. Okay. Let's go back to our producer. And let's make it a little wider than... Whoops. That's the position. Let's make the radius a little bit wider. There we go. And I could actually go to my particle. Let's have it get darker as it dies. Add a little density to it. And I'll actually not have it come in pure white. I'll darken it a little bit there. See, now we're getting something a little bit better. And I can try changing the blending mode on my particle layer, which would be more realistic. We could try screen, we could try add. I like screen better. And then if I wanted to have embers, I could duplicate the smoke and put some embers in there. I mean, duplicate the fire. So you just keep adding on, like duplicating your particle layers to get the look and effect you want. You know, just focus on one layer of particles, then duplicate that, add something else into it, make a little bit of changes. Like I could duplicate this smoke and use it as a displacement map. I'll show you what that's going to look like in a second. There's a real thing of people not wanting to share their images online anymore. Here we go. Got that. I can close that. Import my field. Put it behind everything. Scale it up. Okay, so here's our particles in an image of a field. I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to purge. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate the smoke. Command D. And I'm going to pre-compose it. And I'll call it map. Move all attributes. and I'm going to hide it. So now on my field, I'm going to put a displacement map. Go to my effects. For my displacement map, I'm going to choose my map that I've got right here. Effects and mask. And I'll make it something large so that we can see it pretty quickly. Right there. Okay. The heat from the steam I'm using to create some displacement around the image. Like such. So the smoke is going to be a displacement map, the duplicated one, on top of the image, displacing it. Like you would see with heat from around a fire. So just little things like that. And I didn't have to do anything extra. I already had the smoke. I just duplicated it and I'm using it as a displacement map. And you can see as it's rendering out the displacement around the grass. Right there. And you would just dial it in. I did it extreme so that you could see it real quickly. Let's see what that looks like real quick. See, you can see the displacement animate off the sides. Now it's a bit severe, but like I said, I wanted you to be able to see that displacement the way you would have with real fire. Oh, interesting. Oh, that's got some pizzazz to it. Is this saber or just a ton of glows on a trim path? Okay. See, I caught it by looking at it. Well, I'm glad you're messing around with plugins. Saber is one of those plugins that's free, and it's fun. It's very good to know. Troubleshooting. Okay, great. Because once you try some more complex ideas, you'll quickly see what I'm talking about. I think, like, I like what you're doing here, but I think you should keep the kid. Like, I really like the kid a lot. Let's see, where are we at? Person on swing. Let's hit close you, close you. So we're at, okay, let's hit you. Okay, let's go here. I'm just going to test this out real quick. Let's go file, save as. This is what LabTime's all about. So this way I'm not overwriting your file. Let's kill that opacity change. And we could instead, okay, here's where it's starting to change the location. Let's try P for position. Right. Okay, that's the top of it right there. Line it up. Up a little higher, actually. And if you ever have a pre-comp like this and you want to make it longer, I double-clicked inside it. And let me move this up a little bit. If I go composition settings, let's try 12, just for the fun of it. Now I got to make all my layers longer. So I selected them all. I went here. I'm hitting the Alt and the bracket that's 2 away from the letter P. So that just made those all longer. So now if I go back here, so the person's still there because I made it longer. See the difference with having that person there? And then look at what you're getting here. You know, like we could look up a way of doing a wraparound. If you had a light spill wraparound with this kid, that would add so much depth to this. I mean, you did a great job on this, and you know, I want to see that element stay in the shot. I mean, clearly this would be a little bit longer down there, but I mean, that just really sells it. I don't know if you need this one going around the edge. That might be a little bit of overkill, but I'm loving the experimentation, and obviously this would need to be a little bit longer. So, you know, I'd go in here, composition settings. I'm lazy. I don't want to do math, so I'm going to do 45. Because that's what lazy people do. And move my playhead, select all, Alt, and the bracket that's 2 away from the letter P. Now he's not going anywhere. Boom. And you still got that motion from the expressions and everything. I mean, just really brings it home. I don't know if you need the word studio. I think it's almost distracting. Let's troubleshoot this while I'm here because I'm curious. I know exactly what you're talking about. It bookends the thing, but it keeps the viewer's eye here. You know, like one thing that might be neat is possibly it might be overkill, but the sprocket from the cassette over here, that graphic element just like slowly rotating. You know, like I said, we doesn't need it, but we can just see what it looks like. That's really nice. But you see how you get that extra depth, especially with this silhouette? It's really nice. I mean, you got something really strong here. It was very fun, shows a lot of different techniques, great art style, great palette, you know, so it's got personality. Like this is, I would see this and I'd say, okay, this is someone who understands, you know, motion design plus knows how to use plugins as well. So you're not relying on just a plugin, you're using it to enhance the design. You know what I mean? Which is what is always great. I love seeing that. So, and one last thing. Look right here, 8 bits per channel. Watch what happens when we jump over to 32. Go over to full res. Where's the cassette studio logo? Outlines, logo right here. Okay, so that's at 32. Good, happy with that. We're getting a bit more detail here in your fall off. I can hit U to see your keyframes. I'm just trying to wonder what's causing this hard edge here. I think it's your bias. So I'm going to hit here to hide those masks. See, the higher this goes, the more that's... Yeah, so just watch the bias. Let's try your core size. Yes. Yes, it's free. What you do, you go to Google, type in all one word, Video Copilot, Saber, and it pulls you to the link to download it. This is Andrew Kramer's website, Video Copilot. He's an intermediate to expert level After Effects person. He's got tutorials online. You can find him on YouTube, just Video Copilot. His free plugins that are really useful are Saber and Orb. Orb lets you create 3D planets in After Effects. Yeah, roughly 10 seconds. It could be longer if you want. Like, so I'm going to undo those settings. like this one's like almost 30 seconds, but every bit of it is really good. So how are we transitioning from the dark? Is it an instant change? Yeah, it is. So, and then the glow kicks in. Let's see what that looks like. What were to happen? Here's the dark background. Outlines. It's right here. I don't know. I don't think it needs to fade, but yes, this is great. I really didn't change anything, did I? Right? Oh, I just made this a little bit longer, so I'll still send you this to have for reference. It's looking spectacular. Great job. It's very fun, and plus, you did some learning on your own. Everyone's got my troubleshooting Saber plugin. Before I hop over to Shane's, I just want to remind everybody, this is crucial when you're dealing with Saber. Oh, come on. Okay. Remember, the grid behind this is alpha. It's negative space. This letter is the positive space. Everyone got that so far? Okay, here's what Saber does. Remember, this red box, it's always going to be a square or a rectangle. This is the bounding box for the layer. Saber works off of the bounding box, okay? So if you've got a skull and you want to put Saber around it, you should have that skull layer in Photoshop the size of your screen, set the bounding box is the size of that screen. And then the effect will work properly. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'll show you what I mean. 1 second. If I don't make that layer the full size of the screen, it's going to mess up my effect. And I'll show you. I'll do one right and one wrong. Let me just double check I got Saber loaded up on this laptop. Yeah, I've got it. Okay. So let's hit open. We'll go to the skull. Okay, see, Saber is going to hit this bounding box around there. So I'm going to go canvas. (1920 by 1080). So that's full screen. And I'm going to save as, and I'll call this Skull 2K. So I know this is my full screen one. Okay. So now we've got two completely different pieces of artwork. Keep that open in case I need it later on tonight. There they are. All right, I'll bring in that skull. I'll throw Saber on it. This is the one that is not full screen. And we'll do custom core. Layer mask. No, okay, so let's do this. Let's get rid of the effect. I'm going to go layer, auto trace. Hit OK. Hit M for mask. I don't want the orange mask because you can only put on one. So there's my mask purple. All right, so now I'm going to throw Saber on there. Go to custom core, layer mask. There it is. And you can see it's hitting the bounding box. Okay? Which is what I said was going to happen because that's how the program works. Now, if I throw my 2K in there, right click. Wait, so it's here, layer, auto trace, hit OK, hit M. Give her that inside mask because I don't need it. That one right there. Okay. Throw saber on. Go to my custom core. Choose layer mask. Now it's working properly. See? And I could always duplicate this layer, hide the effect on top, and have the thing going behind it. Ta-da! Quick little lesson in troubleshooting with Saber. Everyone see how bounding boxes can impact how After Effects works? All right, cool. That's all I want you to know is I want you to be able to see it and say, that's the bounding box. It's saying, I'm not going past these confines. Even though the screen goes all the way out here, that layer has its own bounding box. That's why this 2K one, you can see my bounding box is full screen. So that's a quick way of avoiding a lot of headache and heartache in After Effects. Thank you for listening. Real quick, just if anyone's going to be downloading Saber or any other plugins, I believe it's, yeah, so you got to go once you've got them downloaded, you go File, Scripts, and then Install, and you find where it is on your machine, and then it loads up. And sometimes they're like Duick, that's another free one that pops up over here from time to time. So you got to go to your scripts and install. And once you've got them installed, sometimes you have to hit run, find it to load it up. So that's just a little heads up for anyone who's going to give that a try. All right, now let's preview this. Okay, so the glow we were talking about. What's that second body? That's weird. Oh, you know what? Probably because I might have your old artwork. Okay, let's try here. There's your layers. All right. Yes, like I said, just make sure you hand me the artwork as well. Let's take a look at the body. But why is there's body outlines. Okay, all right. I see exactly what's going on here now. Okay, so there's the body, there's the body outlines, effects, glow, too, okay. Let's go up to full. Head over here, we're at 32 bits. Let me take a look at okay, the body does not have the glow. This has the glow. Let's see. Threshold. Okay, so it's one of these. There's the buttons. So for those of you who weren't on when we did this, Shane's artwork, all of those all that art stuff was on one layer, like in Illustrator. And he wanted to add a little bit of life with the buttons. Let me try and line this up real quick. I selected all the keyframes so that they line up perfectly. And what I'm going to do is, let's just see if they stay in the right spot now, because the thing moves around so much. Okay, yeah, see, they moved. I'm going to take these buttons and parent them to the body. Let's duplicate, click off. Nope. Okay, so let's hit U. Let's get rid of all this keyframing, and let's try it one more time. Now they're staying on the body. See the difference? All I had to do was parent it to it. All right, so let me save this as MW so that nothing wrong happens. Since all the artwork was on one layer and he wanted those buttons, what we did was we right-clicked, went create shapes from vector. And when we got our vector shapes, I then clicked the eyeball icon to hide everything except for those 3 buttons. So when we put the effect on, it's only going to affect those 3 buttons. So now let's adjust our threshold. Why am I not seeing it work? Okay, let's... There's the effect. So let's delete that glow. Let's delete that glow. Let's try another glow. Throw it on there directly. Now it's working. I don't know why that wasn't working before, but... So there we go. Was there an expression on it or no? Yeah, what we could do is... Let's pretend we want these lights to flicker, okay? So we'll dial in our look of how we want them to be when they're glowing. Let's see. Let's say we want it to be about that much. All right, let's pretend that's our final look. Now, what I can do is I can duplicate this. I'll call these buttons, so there's no confusion. I'm going to duplicate it, Command D. Now we have 2 layers of buttons. The buttons on the bottom, I'm going to turn off the glow. I'm going to hit T. This is the one with the glow. If I hold down Alt or Option, I click on the opacity. We can put a wiggle in the opacity. Let's try twice a second, comma 170. Let's see what that looks like. I'm just randomly picking some numbers. See, now they're flashing. And you can change that if you want. We can make it 4. Let's try 270. I'm just randomly picking numbers. See? Now I've got some blinking going on. Just like that. Does that help you out? Yeah, so it was really just isolating the buttons. Then we duplicated them and only put the effect on the top layer and put a wiggle, and now everything works perfectly. Yeah, no problem at all. Good stuff. Yes. Can you get to the file, Shane? Okay, yeah, no problem. And while you're looking for that, Dino, your question about the buttons was, can we time this? Sort of, like, remember the first number is number of times per second, and opacity is like kind of iffy, like with the amount. So if you wanted it to blink more, I could try 9 instead of 4. Like that. That gives some randomness to it. But if you want a definite time to it, here's how I would do it. I would... So that's happening. I'd use a slider. So I would go layer new, adjustment layer. And in an adjustment layer, you can put any effects in it you want. They'll affect everything below it. There's our slider. I'm going to hit E for effect. There's my slider. There's the stopwatch. So now I go here. Let's see. It's this top one. Okay, so it's the opacity. That's where it's at. So I'm using my twirl down arrows to get here. If I select the first number and I pick whip from here, not the layer, from my expression to the word slider, 0 is off, 1 is on. So if I wanted to blink on, like right around here, I'd click here, go forward, change it to 1, have it blink however long I want. Let's say I want to blink that long. So I've got to have this value the same as that value. And I can go forward and turn it off. So if you want to go to like the beat of the music or something like that. So there's the flash and now it's gone. So if you want that level of control, use a slider and pick whip from the expression, selecting the first number of the expression. Does that make sense? All right, cool. Another thing we could try, just for the fun of it, because this is lab time, I'm going to delete you, and I'm going to hit undo, 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 undo. All right, here's our glorious expression, and it's working just fine. All right, fine, that's great. This is lab time. This is about learning more. Coming up, we're going to be doing this. It's called getting keyframes from audio. So I'm going to pick a song that I got off of YouTube that's royalty free. Right here. Let's try. We'll just try this one. I don't know what it is, but here's my song. To put music or sound effects into After Effects, same thing. Just drag it into your timeline. And here's our song. Now, if I go to the buttons, so I can pick my song. If I right click, I believe let's try animation. I haven't done this in so long. Or is it right click? Yeah, so it's right click keyframe assistant, convert audio to keyframes. So what that did, I've now got my audio as keyframes right here. So let's go back to our buttons, hit T for transparency. Here's our expression. You can set it to what's in the left channel, the right channel, or both channels. I'm going to try there. And let's see if that works. Let's see if we can have the music drive it. Here we go. It's all about experimenting. So let's go to the amplitude. Both channels. Let's crank this up a bit. Now I'm starting to see the effect. So let's see what happens now. Yep, it's responding to the music, but only at certain parts. So I see what I did wrong. Okay, so here's what I got to do. Because remember, we're dealing with keyframes. I click the word slider to select all my keyframes. Now I can make them larger, and let's see if that does it. Nope. So that one, let's hit undo. Here's our expression again. Let's see the expression. Okay, so that's working as an expression. All right, so let's try our glow threshold. I'm going to Alt or Option click in there, and I'm going to pick whip from my expression here to the slider. And let's see if that works. Yes, see? The louder the music, the brighter the glow. It's going along to the music now. So if I went to my opacity and got rid of this first expression, so we're only looking at the pick whipped one to the audio. See the difference? It's blinking in time to the music. The threshold is. So that's one way of doing it. Like such. So just another way of getting, you know, interest in animation based off something else. We're going to be covering that in a few weeks. So you could use a slider control or you could use audio. I mean, there's so many things you could do. The possibilities are limitless. That's what I like about LabTime. It gives me a chance to show you other techniques that we haven't come across, to show you there's plenty of ways of getting motion design. And then we can pick up Tuesday and finish particles and continue on with our LabTime. Yep. Oh, you know what? Before everyone goes, there's one thing I got to double check. Today is the 24th. Okay, the 7th. All right, yeah. All right, yeah, so the 7th. Perfect. So that gives you an extra week. I think I did that just because every semester, all the teachers have stuff due around the time my homework is due, and everyone wants an extra week. So, all right, the 7th. Yeah, no one sweat that then. Yeah, no problem. And what we can do, if you all want, I can make the lectures for next week a little short to give you extra lab time to ask questions and get your work as best as it can be before it's due. That sound good? All right, cool. Excellent. Well, everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe out there with this winter weather that came back out of nowhere. And, oh, yeah. This goes for the rest of the semester. Again, if there's ever going to be any bad weather alerts or anything like that, I'll let you know at the beginning of the day saying, don't even try to make it to campus. Okay? So keep checking your mail, and hopefully Tuesday we can be back on campus. No problem at all. Have a great weekend, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to edit it down and have it ready for tomorrow morning. No problem at all. Have a great weekend.